best.
But experts say behind the scenes, key parts of the nation's infrastructure system are at a breaking.
To-do list of repairs is staggering. $177 billion needed for the electrical grid, $42 billion for aging airports, and $1.1 trillion for crumbling roads and structurally deficient bridges.
He thought he'd driven into a patch of fog. Then came the horrifying realization he was witnessing the collapse of a building. David Araújo is sharing the gut-wrenching video. You can hear people trapped on their balconies screaming for help. Frantic bystanders try to help.
Go down the stairs.
Then he comes across the pile of rubble where 15-year-old Jonah Handler is buried alive.
I could hear someone saying, "Help me, help me."
Rescuers sift through the rubble, move a mattress, and desperately try to reach the boy. There he is, but he's still trapped.
I think he's alive and hopefully he's gonna survive it.
The kid was saying, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe," so every second counted.
Finally, young Jonah's freed. To date, he is the only victim to be pulled out alive and to have survived. And for the first time, we are now hearing the dramatic dispatch calls as rescuers tried to reach a woman trapped in the debris who was desperately crying out for help. But in the end, they were not able to rescue her.
They are the faces of the missing, 159 souls, young and old, newlyweds, retirees, entire families. Today, their loved ones are sharing their photos and stories as they desperately wait for word of their fate.
I feel like a piece of my heart was just ripped out.
PJ Rodriguez broke down as he headed to the Family Reunification Center to offer a sample of his DNA to help in the search for his missing mother and grandmother.
More than 56,000 American bridges, roughly 1 in 10, are in urgent need of major repairs or replacement. Kimberly Brown is a survivor of America's crumbling infrastructure. 13 years ago, she was driving to a soccer game in Minneapolis when Interstate 35W over the Mississippi River suddenly collapsed.
This is a bridge that seems so strong and so powerful, and it's been able to just absolutely devour itself, if you will.
The emergency unfolding across several states, millions without electricity in Texas and elsewhere across the South. No heat, no water after this first storm, and it's been deadly. At least 15 dead. The family members discovered trying to stay warm in their garage. Some 4 million without power. And this image right here sparking anger in Texas tonight. Houston skyscrapers brilliantly lit, while neighborhoods surrounding downtown are in the dark. Families without heat, without power. At least 140 cases of carbon monoxide poisoning in Houston alone. That woman and an 8-year-old girl dying after authorities say they were trying to stay warm using the car in the garage.
And the death toll is rising. In Galveston County, officials are preparing for the worst, asking the state to bring in refrigerated trucks that can hold as many as 50 bodies.
We're not projecting anything, but I'm afraid that I don't have a whole lot of room for optimism here.
The coldest temperatures in parts of the state in more than 100 years is bursting pipes and damaging homes while families shiver inside. In Houston, a woman and an 8-year-old girl dying of carbon monoxide poisoning after a car was left running in a garage to help generate heat. A man and a 7-year-old boy taken to the hospital. Houston hospitals treating at least 140 patients. 6 people from one family among them, a mother and a child in critical condition. They were heating charcoals indoors to stay warm. Outrage over the outages and images like these showing Houston skyscrapers lit up while much of the city was blacked out. Long lines for food and supplies at the restaurants and stores that are open as the extreme conditions are straining the power grid across the region. Rolling blackouts now happening in at least 14 states that share the grid with Texas. And at least 19 states have had to halt vaccinations and COVID testing because of the harsh conditions.
I was standing on the bridge after falling with the bridge and thinking I was surely going to die. And we had climbed out of the car and we were standing there waiting on the bridge, absolutely in shock, thinking this cannot possibly be real. And so I just raised my arm and just took a picture.
Since 2014, when the city switched water resources from Detroit to the Flint River, there has been a massive increase in lead contamination. And while the situation in Michigan has received a lot of attention, it's not the only city with water problems. So what's wrong with America's water? Well, in 2013, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave the U.S.'s drinking water a grade of D in their infrastructure report card. While they admit that U.S. water on average is actually of a fairly high quality, the infrastructure is nearing the end of its service life. Hundreds of thousands of water mains break every year, and in many cases, the pipes connecting the supply, such as in Flint, Michigan, are old and contaminated with war. This sets limits of how many microorganisms, disinfectants, chemicals, and lead are allowed in public water systems, which serve a majority of U.S. citizens. However, a 2009 report by the New York Times found that a fifth of public water systems in the U.S. violated the Safe Drinking Water Act. Less than 6% of those violators saw fines or punishment by the Environmental Protection Agency. And across the country, more than 1.5 million Americans still don't have reliable plumbing, with many below the federal poverty level. Although it is rare in the United States, there are many groups suffering water poverty and inability to access clean water. These are predominantly the urban homeless population, migrant workers, unregulated border communities, and portions of Native American reservations. One of the reasons that water quality and supply sees a lack of investment and innovation is that it falls by the wayside in favor of emerging technologies. According to The Atlantic's City Lab, out of over $4 billion in venture capital clean tech investment, only about 5% or $200 million went towards researching and improving water. And with drought in regions like the West Coast, water scarcity and rising costs are making it harder and harder for those without water to access or afford it. Residents dealing with Flint's lead-contaminated water pay an average of $140 a month for water and sewage, whereas the surrounding county only pays between $50 and $100 a month. Many residents have even received overdue notices for this deadly water. But despite severe issues in water infrastructure, lack of investment, insufficient plumbing, and water access, the U.S. does manage to provide clean water and sanitation to most of the country. The real problem is getting it to disadvantaged groups and making sure that gross violations like the ones in Flint are dealt with and rectified. As a result of Flint's ongoing water crisis, more than 100,000 residents have been exposed to lead poisoning. Find out how the crisis came to be in the video at the top, and for a broader look at how America's infrastructure is in trouble, check out the video at the bottom. Thanks for watching TestTube News. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for new videos every day.
Most people just assume their water is safe to drink.
You need to get your water tested. This is a national issue.
Lead has been showing up in drinking water all over the country. In the last few years, over 5 million people drank water from systems that violated the EPA's lead limit.
I was given Brace poison water unknowingly for a very long period of time.
The problems began when Flint switched its water source from the Great Lakes to the Flint River. For more than a year, lead leached from the pipes because the city failed to add standard anti-corrosion chemicals to the water.
Scratch like these.
At least 100 children have tested positive for high levels of toxic lead in their blood.
My hair's falling out. My blood tests are a mess. I was healthy.
Flint resident Melissa Mays has been outspoken about the tainted water. She says she was horrified by the new lead readings.
There's no trust. There's no trust in the filters. There's no trust in the state and what the community is doing at this point.
Developing right now, there's an around-the-clock effort to prevent an environmental catastrophe in Tampa Bay. The problem is at the old Piney Point phosphate mine in Manatee County, and the situation is critical. Today, Manatee County declared a state of emergency. As Fox 13's Kimberly Quizon reports, crews are conducting a controlled release as they work to prevent hundreds of millions of gallons of contaminated water from flooding neighborhoods and spilling into Tampa Bay.
The situation is fluid. Right now, pumping has stopped after a siphon line sprung a leak.
Potential damage to nearby homes and businesses, and a major concern, the environment. Water that's located in this gypsum stack is treated, but contains a high level of nutrients, in particular, nitrogen, that could start a harmful alga bloom in Tampa Bay.
Don't fall! It just got filled.
The images coming in after a bridge collapsed onto a Washington, D.C. highway. The awful scene today, the bridge flattened, several cars destroyed, several people rushed to the hospital, in fact. Authorities believe it all happened when a truck slammed into the bridge. ABC's Rachel Scott tonight from the scene.
Tonight, authorities are investigating this terrifying scene, a pedestrian bridge collapsing onto one of the busiest highways in the nation's capital. Officials believe this truck slammed into the bridge, sending it crashing down. Drivers trapped in their cars, buried under the debris along I-295.
We had a collision with the bridge right here, which separated the bridge from its mooring. The result of that collision caused multiple cars to be involved.
At least 5 people were rushed to the hospital. Tonight, all expected to survive.
I heard like a crunching, scraping sound, like nails on a chalkboard, then a boom. I'm just thanking God no one was killed.